Hello, I'm Flora speaking out. Thank you for joining me. I've got a lot on my mind today. One, a poem has been going through my mind, something my mother quoted more than once on a ship going from Europe to America in August 1939. And I remember the chorus of this poem after, what was it, about 86 years? Oh, it's home again, it's home again. America for me. I want a ship that's westward bound across the rolling sea to the blessed land of room enough beyond the ocean bars, where the air is full of freedom and the flag is full of stars. Well, I think quite a lot of us on that ship, 1939, August, were feeling that way. We were leaving Europe, that within 3 weeks would be at war. We'd seen it coming for a whole year. The year was full of wondrous beauty and terrible horror. I've spoken of it in earlier talks, so I won't go into details now. But home seemed a safe place to be. And as we sailed under the Statue of Liberty and saw the flags whipping in the wind as we approached the coast, it felt good to be home. It felt safe. We were not blind to the many faults America had, its persecutions too often, its inequities, areas lacking totally in civil rights. We weren't blind to all that. But compared to what we had seen in Europe, with its 4 monstrous dictators, Stalin the first, Mussolini the second, Franco of Spain the third, and the worst and maddest of all, Hitler. At least our own nation wasn't persecuting, arresting, killing its own citizens. At least our own nation wasn't threatening other countries. It seemed, compared to what we had seen during that year, a place of not only safety but unheard of privileges, backed up by our Constitution, the division of governing powers, the amendments that defended our rights. It seemed almost like a heaven to be going back to it. Well, then we got home. Home seemed very safe. Back in those days, up to about the 1950s, in our fair to middling sized town, no one thought of locking doors at night or locking windows at night. Quite literally, that seems almost unheard of, doesn't it? And I went to school, safest place to be next to home. And we went to church, the safest place to be, those 3 places. The mass shootings didn't begin until about, if I'm remembering correctly, the 1970s. If there were any in my youth, I never heard about them. We began locking the doors and windows, perhaps mid-1950s. The mass shootings began in public market, schools, churches around the 70s, and are now almost commonplace. I'm not one to talk much about the good old days, The good old days were pretty bad old days, but the feeling of safety was among us, maybe particularly from our government. America had gone through tremendous traumas, the uprootings during the Second World War, great shoals of people moved from one part of the country to the other. Then the growing awareness of the need for battling for civil rights. Then the student uprisings in the 60s and 70s. Then the more traumas, the assassinations of leading figures, and of course 9/11. Some people are saying, and they may have a point, that our present crisis is not just due to Trump being voted in and his MAGA gang, but that these are symptoms of maybe a much deeper malaise that goes back much further in our history. It's worth thinking about. But anyway, we don't feel safe anymore, do we? Schools, churches, climate, marketplace. It's not we just don't feel safe. We aren't safe. From our federal government, most of all. We're in a lockdown now. Issue being the enormous slashes at Medicaid. They lie when they say that money was going to undocumented immigrants. It goes to our citizens. The slashing at Medicaid. The ongoing attempt to make the Affordable Care Act unaffordable. I don't know what's going to result. We don't feel safe for other reasons. Our citizens are being profiled openly in the search for illegal immigrants. Never mind anymore that they pretend it's a search for violent criminals. Now profiling is urged upon them. I heard a group of ICE agents being told, look for people who don't look like you. Stop them on the street. Try to find their papers. The average citizen is not safe. Our cities are being occupied by National Guards and federal agents dressed like soldiers, but not real soldiers. Cities that Trump declares are hotbed cesspools of violent crime, cities at war. Cities, mostly democratic cities in democratic states. Cities where the governors of the states and the mayors of the cities saying, you are not needed here. All right, with this lockdown going down, the uproar over that, I hope something else won't be overlooked. The same day that our government shut down at midnight, Trump gave a speech to 800 generals and admirals gathered from their posts all over the world, taxpayer expense, of course. People who were needed in their posts where emergencies could happen at any time. If you've not heard what he said during that talk of over an hour, I urge you to read it or to call it up. I heard it. The soldiers, those great generals, those admirals sat there expressionless and silence as they saw their commander-in-chief the one whose fingers are near the nuclear codes, going demented in front of their eyes. The speech mostly made no sense. Sentences were not finished. He rambled, he boasted. He talked about how Biden kept falling down the stairs and how careful he is not to fall down the stairs, and urged the generals and admirals not to fall down the stairs. He talked about how much he loves his signature, how everyone loves his signature. He talked about the fact they changed the name from Department of Defense to Department of War. He said the very title is frightening other nations into peace. Well, after he'd stopped rambling remarks off the wall, then he became venomous and ominous. He was telling these generals and admirals, and I'm quoting him now, our cities are under invasion from forces within, no different than foreign enemies. We are going to strengthen them out one by one, to straighten them out. Not strengthen, straighten them out. It's a war. They spit, we hit. And then he said, a wonderful idea, let's turn these dangerous cities, occupied, turned into war zones by these extremist, leftist, democratic radicals, into training ground for our military recruits. This is exactly what he said. In other words, telling the military leaders, I am making war on all those who dissent from my agenda, making war on his own people. So where is safety? I was remembering this week a fortress in southern France, where about the late 1600s, the French king had wiped away the law that gave religious tolerance to all the citizens of France, and instead made it a law that everyone had to conform to the state religion. He enforced it. He sent armed troops into villages, towns, cities, countryside, and anyone he found worshiping in a church of a different from the state religion, even people worshiping in their homes quietly, they were arrested, imprisoned, often executed. Well, this fortress that we visited was a prison especially for women of other religions than the state religion, mostly what they call the Huguenots. These women ranged in ages from grandmothers to young girls, separated from their fathers, mothers, children, husbands, grandchildren, imprisoned there until they surrendered. I remember noticing a deep carving into the stone wall, the word résister, resist. Where was the safe place for these women, some of them there for years? First of all, of course, it was in their faith. It was also that they were together. They could sing together, they could pray together, they could nurse each other, they could uphold one another in the act of integrity. I noticed the big room where they were kept had windows, lots of windows, The place was full of light, but you couldn't see out of the windows. They were too high. And they would have to boost each other up by the group there to look out of the window, to tell the group what was happening. I've never forgotten that. Resist, carved into the stone. And most of them did. Very few gave in. Where is our safety now? Where it's always been, from time immemorial, deep in the freedom, integrity of our own hearts, minds, spirits. The feeling of being rooted and grounded, loved and valued in a universe of purposefulness. In the community we build around us, where those of like mind, not necessarily political, but of like mind, of doing justly, loving mercy, renouncing arrogance, and standing for integrity and telling the truth. One of our great political leaders last night said something I'd never heard expressed quite that way before. I don't know if it came from him or if he was quoting. The power of the people is much greater than the people in power. I'll repeat it. The power of the people is much greater than the people in power. Let's stretch out our hands to each other, speaking the truth, singing together, praying together, resisting together. Thank you for being with me. This is a joy to share these thoughts with you. See you later.